Well, hello, everyone. We are back for World Hunger. World Hunger season is upon us. It's hard to believe that it's here so quickly, but we're excited to be back and talking about this important issue. My name's Chris Orm. I'm part of the church and community engagement team with World Renew. And today, joining me is Jacqui Mignot. Jacqui, welcome.
Thanks, Chris. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, it's good. We've done the podcast together. We've had a few conversations together, about I think really important stuff, and it's always been fun. So I'm glad to be together. But you are here today as a special guest. You're the author of this year's World Hunger Devotional. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about who you are, and then we'll dive in to what we're going to talk about today.
Sure, thanks. Well, I am very glad to be here with you, talking about world hunger and talking about our role as Jesus people following the ways of Christ in our world, and working for justice and all of that. I right now am a campus minister. I work at the University of Calgary in Calgary, Alberta. Um, I have also been a part of the Committee for Contact with the Government, which is the CRCNA's in Canada's ministry that does advocacy work for justice issues with the federal government, and then also advocacy work and education work with congregations. So I've been part of that group of people doing that work for a number of years now. And I regularly contribute to the Do Justice blog. So it's kind of my connection here as well. And I mostly just spend a lot of time thinking and praying, and in past roles as a pastor, thinking a lot about how do we make justice issues that can feel far in the circles we live in the circumstances we live in here, can feel far away. How do we engage in those in real ways and make our faith, that's maybe not the right way to say it, but engage in practices that actually bring transformation to our own hearts and around us. So that's kind of why I'm always thinking about, I don't know all the ways this might happen, but I'm always asking those questions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. And so this year you were the author of this year's World Hunger Devotional, Hunger for Good. And tell us a little bit about what jumped out at you as you were preparing, as you were writing. Was there something that was there a theme or something that resonated kind of over and over throughout your process?
Well, in some ways, the theme is all things. All things belong. All things are God's. All things, and so when I look at the world, and I kind of just ask, really, all things? Are you sure you have a handle on all things, God? And even in the recent couple weeks, watching the news and just the devastation happening in the Middle East, and being like, all things, God? And like, it's a serious, deep question. And I wanted to kind of maybe remind myself, most of all, and here's the secret, any writer's really just writing to remind themselves of things, but remind myself and our community that our trust is that God does have all things and God is not far. So how do we think through that? So that's kind of why this is the theme for World Hunger this year. Looking at the ways, all the things that belong to God, and how we might just, wrap our minds around that, I guess, in this devotional practice. But one of the ones that has been sticking out to me since I've been thinking about it quite a bit was the theme of all wisdom. All wisdom belongs to God, and in some ways, one of the life-giving habits of someone who does justice work has to be engaging in the wonder of how the world is, and the goodness of how the world is, and how creation works, and how peoples know things and learn things, and the wisdom that gained there. So I think about if all the wisdom of God is God's, then that's such a deep kind of curiosity question. Like,
mm,
well, what? Okay, well, what is God's then?
mm.
Um, so I was just thinking about the wisdom of our partners, of World Renew's partners too, in various places around the globe that know things about those communities. They have wisdom about those communities and the ways life flourishes there that I'll never have. I don't live there. I don't know that place. I don't know the land. I don't know the culture. And so that wisdom is God. So it just creates this like opening to wonder, like, oh, what do I need to learn here? What do I
Mm.
need to learn about God's wisdom? And that kind of is it's a joyful place for me, that like humility of I don't know all the things. I don't know all
Yeah.
the wisdom, but I wonder what it would like to be to learn and to be open to God's wisdom coming through all these different voices that do know what it looks like to flourish in their culture, in their context, in their communities. So I like that. To me, wisdom and wonder go together. Like the more you can kind of cultivate wonder about, oh, what's going on there, and that curiosity, that's where you get to wisdom. And then I like thinking that that's all God's. All the wisdom you come across is God's wisdom, because this is God's world. Like, and so that's kind of just a beautiful way. Like I need to go to the beautiful places too to sustain in the justice work.
Right.
Yeah, so it's one of the things that has been standing out to me.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting, um, I don't want to call it a dilemma, but it's an interesting thing
Hmm.
where, we want to faithfully and truthfully engage, the topic of world hunger. It's not a light topic. It's not a feel good moment. But there's also that very real sense of God's presence in
Yeah.
the midst of the challenge of God's sustaining love and care and compassion and mercy. And
Yeah.
so, like for us, as those of us who are going to journey through the devotional, as we approach World Hunger Sunday later in November, I'm I'm wondering, what's the posture? Like, what are we invited into as far as a posture to begin to um, you know, read through this? You mentioned curiosity. What can we do to foster that?
Mm, yeah. Well, yeah, lots of things, especially around hunger, World Hunger Day, because in my context, in a lot of our contexts in North America, hunger is not the issue, but then in some contexts it is. So what am I trying to say is, how do you cultivate um, an understanding of the issues? How do you cultivate a wonder about how the systems all work together? And that part of that might be like just getting really curious about, like, where does your food come from?
Hmm.
What's that system? Like my kids think this food comes just from the grocery store because they've never seen otherwise. And so in all the communities, there's people who know. There's agriculturists and farmers in our communities who might know more. And so getting really curious about how food gets to us and all the systems that have to work together. And that's just a beginning in our place right now
Hmm.
to understand the the systems that are at play. And then we can use that to engage in other places and other worlds, and we'll hear it differently. We'll
Hmm.
hear about people when we understand they live also in systems too, and we can help and address that. I think it's important for us to, I don't know, there's something about engaging in seeing things from a different point of view that's essential to justice work. And I hope as part of the devotional practice that we have as people who want to engage in um, for the flourishing and participating with God in the flourishing um, movements in our world.
Hmm.
I don't know if that made any sense, but
Yeah, no, no, that I
yeah.
think that, that made a lot of sense. And I think for some of us, maybe approaching a, like our spirituality or our faith, the way we follow Jesus, the way we pray, the way we engage with issues, justice issues, how are we to respond, you know, um, maybe coming to some of these with questions might be a new thing, right?
Right.
That
Yeah.
might be, maybe we grew up in a context where, maybe don't really ask questions, but this might be a new practice to start to ask questions. And I think it's, I'm reminded of, there's a story in the New Testament where Jesus and his followers are hanging out, and Jesus, sort of says to Peter, "Hey, you know, who do you say that I am?"
Mm.
Jesus encourages the answer by asking a question, and so maybe we can take some of
Mm.
that practice as we approach these issues. But I want to talk about practice, because
Mhm.
one of the great things about this resource, is that each devotional, each entry, there's a practice
Mm.
portion. There's something to do. Can you talk a bit about why it's important to link, sort of what we're doing, in our hearts, in our minds, spiritually? Uh, what happens when we link that to practice, to doing something? Why is it important?
Yeah. I think, I mean, there's probably a lot of different answers. One of the things I'm thinking right now is that it's really easy to let our faith become an idea and
Mm,
let our faith become an abstraction, um, an ideology, and live that way as if our ideas about faith were the things that transform the world. And ideas are important.
mm,
Um, but it has to move from up here down into here, and the way it does that is by consistently embodying something over and over and over again till the I don't know, I kind of think of it like till that those neural pathways are changed. So we um I mean, you can think of it practice in general in all sorts of, you practice a scale until you have the muscle memory to do it, or practice all sorts of things in that way.
mm,
uh, so I do think practicing something, not, and so when you think of it in these ways, practices are ways of getting out of your mind and into your body with actions that can help change and transform until it becomes muscle memory that you would act this way, or walk this way, or have this sort of posture in the world. I, I'm in one way, one of the things I was thinking about um, was the practice of storytelling
mm,
and story hearing. So there's two practices that I think we need to cultivate regularly, so we learn how to tell our stories and learn how to hear other stories well. And I was thinking about that in context of um, uh, all times are God's, the good times and the bad times, and there's a lot of bad times.
mm.
Uh, so how do we remember that God is not far? I think if we rely on just our ability to have mind over matter, it probably won't lead to, it's not going to lead to a lot of transformation, and it's going to exhaust us. But if we can hold on to a practice of um, telling the stories of when we knew God was not far, when we knew God was what had did provide,
Mm,
and then we could practice the story, or engage in the practice of listening to the stories of that happening, and the unexpected ways God showed up, and the unexpected ways that there was provision. And pardon me, often that's through people and events that we would never have expected, we would not have foretold. That's the way God works, apparently, a lot of the time. And so we have that practice of hearing, and so our ears are attuned to,
mm.
oh, oh yeah, okay, God's something's at work here, and I can hold on to that even in the midst of this is not great around me. And it's not a mind over matter thing. It's not an abstraction that I have to live in a different plane of reality. It's a no, I'm in my bones. I know I've heard these stories. They've transformed me enough to be able to keep going and still be able to say God is not far. So yeah, that's kind of one of the ways I've been thinking about. So practice of
Yeah.
story hearing. Mm.
That's beautiful, and it's an awesome place, I think, to to pause for now. We're
Yeah.
going to be back next week. Next week, I'll be with Naomi Bula, who's our director of marketing in Canada, marketing communication, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the resource. So, folks, we would love if you would join us in reading through and doing through this resource. And if you want to get a hold of it, you can visit worldrenew.ca/resources. We'll put a link in the comments below this video. Jacqui, thanks so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your heart with us and really giving us, I think, a really practical tool to to begin to align our hearts with the things that are on God's heart. So thank you. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Sure. Thank you.